With HLTV announcing their top 20 players of 2024, I thought it would be fun to have a look at each player in the list, breaking down their roles in the team, their playstyle and how they work with each other. So I went through all of the players' profile on HLTV, downloaded a few of their most recent matches in each map and began analysing. What I ended up with is an 8,000 word essay on Notepad, describing every player's profile, their roles on each map and their playstyle. At first, I thought of doing a 5 to 6 minute video per player with their playstyle and role on a map by map basis. But because some of these players have already left their teams to join another, their roles might be slightly different in 2025. Instead, I will be compressing all 20 players into one video with a short 1 to 3 minute segment for each player. In the current meta of Counter-Strike, every single player in the Tier 1 scene is able to play every other role to an extremely high level. As Batman once said,
"No battle plan survives first contact with the enemy. How you adjust to the unforeseen is what determines success."
Depending on the positions and state of the map, an entry fragger can easily become a lurker, and your supportive riflers can be entry fraggers. What I'll be explaining is the players' initial protocols, what they are generally tasked with on each map, and their typical reactions to situations. So let's get started. Starting at number 20 is Torzi, a Hungarian AWPer playing for Mouse. Coming from Mouse NXT, Torzi has always been a rather inconsistent AWPer. He is still growing as a player, being a young talent from a relatively young team. On the T side, Torzi is usually the one throwing early round utilities for his team. When taking space, he plays with the main pack, providing overwatch for his teammates while they push to take space. He is a rather passive AWPer and rifler, often being one of the last few players to enter a site, and rarely tries to go for any early round aggressions or picks. On the CT side, as an AWPer, Torzi usually plays the rotator positions, but rarely goes for any opening duels. Instead, he is usually tasked with throwing supportive utility for his team while they try to find an early round duel instead. After throwing the utilities, Torzi will provide covering fire on gaps made by his team. You can find him doing this a lot on maps like Ancient, Nuke, and Inferno. Because of his very passive playstyle, he doesn't usually have impressive stats in each game. That being said, his role is still very important for his team, acting as a brick wall to cover every potential gap that the opponent might take. At number 19, we have Illich. He is a veteran player coming from his days in Liquid. Usually a star player in his own right, Illich is a very consistent and one of the best riflers coming from North America. On the T side, Illich is a space taker. While not always being an entry fragger, he is tasked to find space in a pair or with a pet and take duels in key position to get map control, before fully committing into a site. When entering a site, he is usually the second or third guy in trying to trade up for his team, and being the closer for the late rounds. The space he creates is usually the key in winning the round. On the CT side, Illich is placed in star rotator positions such as Anubis middle, Ancient middle, Inferno arch, or vertical ramps. He is put in positions where he is enabled to take aggressive opening duels to get an early man advantage, and he is not afraid to take these duels, usually enabled by his team through supportive utility or covering fire. Because of his roles and position, Illich's responsibility in his team is extremely high, where one single kill or space that he creates can easily make or break the round. Next, we have Robs, the star of Estonia. Once upon a time, he was labelled a cheater by many legendary pros in the community. Now, he is firmly placed into the ranks of legends himself, making a name for himself with his surgical, precise movement and aim. Robs has always been one of the most mechanically gifted players Counter-Strike has to offer. 2024, however, was not so good for him. Robs has had a dip in form towards the latter half of 2024, only being able to recover his form for the Shanghai Major playoffs. On the T side, Robs is a lurker. While the team plays as a pack, Robs will oftentimes be on his own, ensuring no gaps are made on the opposite side of the map, and getting information for his team. Robs plays the game like a ghost. He rarely makes his position known to his opponents, playing off angles and slowly gathering information until he finds his opportunity to strike. While not as often compared to other lurkers on this list, Robs will go for picks and duels on timings that he believes he can win. When the team needs him to enter a site, he will often be the third or last guy in. When the site is taken, Robs acts as an insurance, covering the flanks or finding a timing to flank, typically closing the round for his team. On the CT side, Robs plays the anchor positions such as A side on Ancient, A side on Anubis, Ramps on Nuke, Apps in Inferno, and B on Dust 2. The exception being Mirage, where he is the connector player, often fighting for space in middle. Much like his T side, Robs is very patient and surgical. rarely moving from his position even if there is a lot of pressure coming from the other side of the map. He is sometimes given the secondary AWP to boost his ability in anchoring a site. Jinfat, the younger brother of Sergey from the 2019 End squad. Much like his brother, Jinfat came into the Tier 1 scene guns blazing. Also coming from Mouse NXT, Jinfat cemented himself as one of the most promising anchors in the world, where even teams like Vitality, G2 and Falcons would want to try and buy him out. On the T side, Jinfat is also a very passive lurker. He is usually tasked to play the extremities during a default, either A or B. When he is alone, he doesn't find timings or gaps, but ensures that the enemy team doesn't get any either, usually waiting until his teammate groups up with him or he groups up with them. If he is with his teammate, he will play as a pack and assume the role of the trade fragger, following his team as they take the space, usually being the second or third guy into a site. On the CT side, he plays the same anchor position as Robs, with the exception of Ancient and Mirage, where Jinfat is the B anchor on Mirage and the mid player on Ancient. Unlike Robs, Jinfat is quick to rotate and assist his team. He will make his position known with utilities and jump spotting on site in exchange for information against the opposing team. He is much more proactive as a player, willing to give his position in exchange for space on another side of the map. As he moves around the map a lot more than Robs, the enemy could sometimes catch him off guard. Ima, the star of the Gamer Legion core that made it to the finals of the Blast Paris Major back in 2023. After being picked up by Na'Vi when they shifted into an international roster, the team found little to no success until the Copenhagen Major, where they string a series of event wins and final placements before bombing out of the Shanghai Major. Ima played a pivotal role in Na'Vi's success under the wings of Blade and LXCB's tactical approach to the game. On the T side, Ima plays like an aggressive lurker and space taker. He is confident in his aim and is often tasked to gather space by himself. Unlike Jinfat or Robs, Ima is extremely proactive in his lurks that enables him to take heads-on duels against some of the best players. In a way, he plays like a one-man entry fragger in his team, which is a massive responsibility as he could easily die without being able to get traded. When entering a site, he is usually one of the last players in, going for trade frags and is usually the closer for the rounds. On the CT side, Ima plays rotator roles such as Connector in Mirage, Arch in Inferno, or Mid in Ancient. As a rotator, he is given a lot of space to take duels and find space for his team. Much like Elite, he is not afraid to take head-on duels, and is extremely confident and proactive. Here is a one-round example of how Ima can control the map for his team. Ima starts the round off with his standard protocol ensuring mid presence with Bit, and making sure that Heroic doesn't go for any aggressive plays unpunished. Then, Ima will support Bit by taking control of A main together. After A main is secured, Ima will then rotate to B side and apply pressure on the B ramps players before smoking Cave to slow Heroic down. As Na'Vi is now lacking control on mid in the mid round, Ima and LXCB try to gather more space by hiding in the cave smoke, hoping to catch a Heroic player off guard. While the trades ultimately did not work out in their favour, you can see Ima's impact and presence felt across the whole map in a span of just one round. Xantares, the man who can pick so fast that they titled an entire pick in his name. A veteran in the scene spanning all the way back to even the early days of CSGO. Xantares is a hyper-aggressive sharpshooter who, while he might not have many achievements, it is certainly not for the lack of his own firepower. On the T side, Xantares plays the entry fragger, often finding space for his team and being the first man into a fight while his teammates try to trade him. When clearing space, Xantares tend to take duels without getting utility support such as flashes from his teammates, only firepower support in terms of trading potential. This gives his team the potential to be a lot more explosive into getting a site, but it also provides a much higher risk for his team. On the CT side, Xantares also plays the rotator positions such as A side on Nuke or Connector on Mirage. Much like Ima and Elite, he is not afraid to take duels against anyone pushing against him. He is even more aggressive than Ima or Elite as a rotator and is extremely mobile on the map. He will try to put himself in positions to multi-frag and oftentimes deliver. He will also team up with his teammate to re-aggress or push a certain side to find openings for his team. Whenever the team requires an aggressive play on either side of the map, he will be the player doing it. Exertion, the third young talent from the Mouse NXT core that transitioned into its main roster. Exertion is the entry fragger of the team and one of their star players. He came into the Tier 1 scene playing incredibly well, holding his own against the top 5 teams, cementing himself a position in the scene. He is, however, regarded as a group stage player as his playoff stats on stage usually drops off. On the T side, Exertion is the space taker and entry fragger, usually the first player into a site and the first player to take any form of contact. Much like Xantares, Exertion is confident and aggressive. He can play in a pack or a pair and often creates an incredible amount of space for his team. and can easily transition into being the side entry or the lurker. Exertion creates a different form of explosive impact for his team as he often works through smokes or tries to find timings for his team, which could easily backfire, but when it works, essentially secures the round. Unlike Xantares, Exertion is a little more lackadaisical in the way he clears his angle, that is for the sake of speed. He trusts his team to cover his gaps as he scales into a site incredibly fast, getting the space quicker than most other teams, but at times causes gaps that could spiral around out of control. On the CT side, Exertion plays high impact anchor positions and some rotator positions. He is an extremely mobile player on the map, usually playing up close to take duels and is supported by a secondary player as he fights for map control. He is quick to throw utility support for his team on either side of the map and will often go for aggressive maneuvers to try and find an opening. Spinks, Vitality's secondary star player. Initially coming from ends under Snappy Sphinx, Spinks made a name for himself as one of the best lurkers in the current Counter-Strike scene. After securing the Blast Major title alongside Vitality back in 2023, Vitality has had an up and down trend in the last year, which caused tension in the team, leading Spinks to eventually leave Vitality. On the T side, Vitality plays a very execute-heavy playstyle. This means that Spinks doesn't really have as much time to play out a lurk, often entering the site along with his team. As such, he is usually one of the last players to enter a site, cleaning up what is needed, essentially being the closer for the round. Similar to Ima, Spinks tend to gather space with a teammate as the trade fragger before planting himself in a favourable position to lurk, while his team enters a site. When given the chance to lurk, Spinks tries to find timings. Unlike Robs or Jimfight, who are a lot more patient when holding a space, Spinks actively looks for a timing, trying to creep up and catch a player off guard, making him one of the more aggressive lurks in the scene. On the CT side, Spinks is a flex rotator, usually being a secondary anchor on a site while Zywoo covers the rest of the map. However, Spinks is given more space than an anchor. On maps like Mirage, Dust 2 and Nuke, Spinks is tasked to fight in highly contested positions like B-Short, Middle or Mini. Spinks is a balanced player where he is not always aggressive and looking for duels, but he is also not a super passive player that will hold an anchor for very long. Malps, initially the star of MAT, he was brought over by G2 in the middle of the season to replace Nexa as a firepower upgrade. Since then, he has swapped his role as a star rifler to something more akin to a supportive rifler, as he gives more of his space to Nico and Manasi. As Malps had a long stint in both MAT and G2 in 2024, I'll try to cover his roles in both teams. In MAT's T side, Malps plays the role of an entry fragger for sites and is a space taker during the defaults, usually playing as a pack to take map control on certain spots. However, he is not as aggressive as other entry fraggers on this list, thus making the team less explosive in general. When he or his team gets an opening kill, they tend to slow the round down to play out the man advantage. Interestingly, as an entry fragger, he tends to value his health more so than the others on the list, meaning that when he is low on health, he will be a lot more passive, giving space for someone else on his team to take fights instead of trying to be the bait. For their CT side, Malps plays the star rotators such as Connector on Middle, Middle on Ancient or Middle on Dust 2, the exceptions being the A anchor on Vertigo and B anchor for Inferno. As a rotator, Malps is naturally designed to be aggressive, trying to take duels and fights wherever he can. However, he is actually less active compared to the other players on this list. Most of his aggression comes from the early round, whereas in the mid to late round, he plays to cover for his team or to hold his initial rotator spots. In G2's T side, Malps continues his role as a space taker and entry fragger. Malps is usually tasked to control ends of a map as a pair and look for optimal duels before fully committing into a site. When the team is entering a site, he will be one of the first few players into the site. On G2's City side, he is placed in more anchor positions such as A side on Mirage, B side on Nubis, Rams on Nuke, or A long on Dust 2, giving the more aggressive roles to Manasi or Nico. He plays a very passive anchor style, usually jump spotting or holding long angles to hold for a retake. Wonderful. Initially meant to be the next Manasi, who was meant to be the next Simple, Wonderful is also a young flashy opper with the mechanics to back it up. After having an underwhelming stint in Spirit and Sprout, Wonderful was added into Navi's international lineup in place of Simple Sprig from the pro scene. Since then, he has gotten his most successful stint under the wings of Navi, even winning a major. On the T side, Wonderful is a pack player. He moves with the team and often plays to trade for his entry fraggers. He doesn't cover anchors as much as Tozu, but instead plays to trade his team as quick as he can. When he's opping, he's given a lot more space to find an opening duel with aggressive maneuvers supported by his team. As an AWPer, he is extremely active and will move to trade and support his team, at times leaving gaps of his own. On CT, Wonderful plays the rotator, except Inferno where he's an A-shot player. He's a hyper-aggressive AWPer who will look for opening fights supported by his team. Mobile and aggressive, Wonderful is given a lot of space to rotate and pick his fights on all sides of the map. He doesn't play any differently with the AWP or with a rifle, and while he might not be known to be as sharp as Zaiwu or as fast as Manasi, Wonderful is still confident in taking duels and will not shy away from re-peeking into an enemy. Frozen, the second star of FaZe, initially replacing Twist from the major winning core of youngsters in 2023. Frozen had to adjust his roles from his time in Mouse, giving a lot of space to players like Robs. However, that did not stop him from performing. Whether that be because of his familiarity with Kerrigan's in-game leading, Frozen remains the most consistent player of FaZe in 2024. On the T side, Frozen usually plays as a supportive rifle, throwing utilities for his teammate to take space. Depending on the map, he will either move as a trade fragger in the pack, or hold ends of a map alone to prevent players from pushing before grouping up with the team to support. While not as passive as Robs, Frozen plays a more passive role compared to his other teammates. When entering a site, Frozen will usually be the third or fourth player in, trying to get trades and close out the rounds. On the CT side, Frozen plays rotator roles similar to Ema, given a lot of space and freedom to take fights that he needs or wants to. Interestingly, Frozen is not as aggressive as compared to the other rotators on his list. He rotates to enable his teammates to take duels instead, by throwing supportive utility or trading for his team, instead of being the first player to fight for the anchor's support. Bit, the last player of the CIS major winning Na'Vi roster to still be in Na'Vi. Bit is a laser-sharp rifler that came into the scene as a rookie and made waves under the wings of Na'Vi. Now, under the new international lineup, Bit has proven himself with another major win and cements himself as a star in his own right. On the T side, Bit plays with the pack as the entry fragger and space taker on the map. As the entry fragger, Bit is actually a lot more passive than the other entries, at times holding with his team and relying on Ema's place or information before taking any aggressive fights. On defaults, he is often holding angles and not really looking for any fights until a site has been decided in which he will be the first man to look for the space and openings while his teammates support. On the CT side, Bit plays a mix of anchor and rotator positions. Stoic and undeterrable, Bit is a very passive player that is extremely patient in the game. Like a mix between Robs and Frozen, he doesn't often make his position known and rarely oversteps or make risky plays alone. When he plays the rotator, he moves to support his team and usually provides covering fire or throwing utility support. Brokey, quite possibly the most controversial player on this list. A rifler turned AWPer known for his flashy combat AWPing playstyle, Brokey has always been a top tier AWPer with insane mechanics both in terms of his movement and his aim. This year, however, would be considered an underperforming year for him, as a string of inconsistent performance has led FaZe to lose out on multiple playoff games and eventually consider this year an unsuccessful year. On the T side, Brokey moves with the pack as one of the last few players, carrying the bomb and throwing supportive utility. Similar to Torzi, he tries to cover for his team as they gather space. However, Brokey is given more freedom as an individual. He will be given space to take fights with the AWP if he thinks he can find the opening, at times being the entry or second fragger. Brokey is a very flexible player where if required to, he can easily forgo the AWP to transition himself into being a trade fragger. On maps like Inferno, Brokey does not use the AWP on the T side, even if they have the economy to do so. On the City side, Brokey plays more like an anchor than a rotator, which is not common for the top AWPers. He is usually tasked to hold high pressure points like B-Rams on Ancient, A-Shot on Inferno, and Heavens on Nuke. Being more passive, Brokey holds these angles for long periods of time instead of taking any aggressive risks to try and find an opening pick. That role is given to his teammates instead. He would occasionally try to find timings, but would more often than not play a safer route. Flamesy, the young star of Vitality. Originally coming from a rather unsuccessful stint in OG, Flamesy joined Vitality after the Blast Paris Major, replacing Dupree as a young gun. Since then, Flimsy had his most success in the roster following the likes of Zai Wu. Young but reliable, Flimsy is a role player and understands what he needs to do for his team to succeed. On the T side, Flimsy usually moves with the pack, often as the first player in as a space taker and entry fragger. Although not entirely aggressive, Flimsy understands the role he is tasked with very well. As mentioned before, Vitality plays a very execute-heavy playstyle. Flimsy will oftentimes be responsible for gathering the space needed before the execute happens, sometimes with a teammate, sometimes with the pack, and occasionally alone. When entering a site, Flimsy will often be the first player in as the entry fragger, while his teammates trade for him. On the CT side, Flimsy plays the anchors on the map. Unlike other anchors, Flimsy is a little bit more proactive. He understands his timings on his anchors and will sometimes leave his post to support his team, or re-aggress on his own to find a timing. When he anchors, Flimsy tries to play close. While not aggressive and finding picks, he will gladly take fights he can when they try to enter his site. Shiro, Spirit's AWPer. Initially finding success in the online Gambit roster, then having troubles in Cloud9, Shiro has always been in an up and down trend throughout the years, and at times a very inconsistent player, both in terms of his gameplay and his mental fortitude. This year, however, with the help of Dong, Shiro is able to find his form and carry his weight to the major title. Shiro is a passive AWPer, one of the few especially coming from the CIS region, giving his base to the star players like Dong. On the T side, Shiro plays with the pack as one of the last few players in, covering the team's gaps like Torzi. He is often tasked to show supportive utility for his team as they try to get a space or enter a site. Because of his very passive playstyle, Shiro will often leave himself behind in the pack as they get a space, which in turn reduces the firepower of the pack but leaves room for Shiro to find the gaps. On the CT side, Shiro is a rotator. While he is mobile and quick to rotate, he rarely pushes into an enemy's line of fire. Instead, he tends to hold angles against players pushing into him. This playstyle works best with a player like Dong, as Shiro is able to provide overwatch while Dong with his incredible aim is able to get the openings. This means that Shiro is really hard to catch out of position, but it also comes at the cost of Shiro's impact as an AWPer. JL, J Legend, the star of Na'Vi. After having an impressive run in the Blast Paris Major under Apex, JL joined Na'Vi for the international project. Initially meant to be a sort of secondary star and supportive player to Simple and Aimer, JL proved himself time and time again, easily being the best player in Na'Vi, and deservedly the major MVP of the Copenhagen Major. On the T side, JL is one of the more aggressive support players. He plays with the pack as a trade fragger, but is given a lot of space to find picks of his own before regrouping with his team, and giving Beat the entry fragging role. Because of the space given to JL to try and find picks of his own, JL is at times able to create an immense amount of pressure on opponents early into the round, giving a lot of opportunities for his team when they regroup. On the CT side, JL plays the anchor roles such as A side on Nuke, B side on Dust 2, and B side on Inferno, the exception being B shot on Mirage. As an anchor, JL is very proactive and unafraid to take fights, often playing very close to the entry points and looking to take the duels. This sort of playstyle grants him the ability to rotate or flank quicker than if he were to play safe on the side, but it does come at the risk of getting caught out of position when the opposing team does a full execute against him. However, because of JL's understanding of the game, and perhaps a result of counter-stratting, JL will sometimes be able to turn the opponent's execute against them by finding a crucial kill and repositioning to a safer spot. Nico, need I say more? Nico was and still is one of the best riflers in the Counter-Strike scene, spanning all the way back to 2016 from the Nico Sports era. Versatile in almost any role he plays, and almost always the top contender for any team he plays for. Nico has definitely cemented himself as a legend of Counter-Strike in the eyes of many, and one of the best players to have ever graced this game to have not yet won a major. On the T side, Nico plays with the pack as the trade fragger. Tasked with getting space on the map, Nico is proactive and, needless to say, confident. Even when he's on his own, he'll try and take duels he believes he can win, even if it's an AWPer. Because of this, he is able to generate an incredible amount of space for his team. However, it does come at a cost that if he gets caught out, the team might be put in an awkward position to close the round. On the CT side, Nico plays the star rotator roles, actively looking for openings and duels that he can take. Proactive and mobile, Nico always tries to be where the action is before it happens, sometimes even creating the action himself. He is also oftentimes given the support from his teammates to make these aggressive plays, utilizing his sharp aim and game sense to get a man advantage. Zaiwu, the game himself. Born on the same day that Counter-Strike was released, Zaiwu is a prodigy of the game, and would be considered by some as the CSGO GOAT if not for simple. Zaiwu is an AWPer. He makes fundamentally strong moves that can benefit the team as a whole. His strong point is not just that he has an incredible aim or does flashy plays, but that he almost never makes any mistakes that could cost his team the round. On the T side, Zaiwu plays with the pack, usually as a trade fragger as he covers angles while the team enters a site. While Vitality plays a very execute-heavy playstyle, Zaiwu can be given a lot of space to find opening duels with a teammate before grouping up and executing a site. When he is rifling, he will play a little bit more aggressive, trying to trade his team and taking duels to close out a round. When he is AWPing, Zaiwu is a lot more passive, holding angles for his team while slowly advancing with them to enter a site, controlling the space he gains, but not getting more. On the CT side, Zaiwu plays the star rotator positions. As a rotator, Zaiwu does not often look for duels, but instead tries to hold against any aggressive plays. He is quick to rotate but isn't typically aggressive, opting to anchor with his team instead. Because of his timings in rotations, it can easily feel that Zaiwu is everywhere at once, and yet it feels incredibly difficult to catch him because of his very passive playstyle. m0NESY, the baby goat, the Nick Simple, the yellow flash. m0NESY was a young star coming into the scene as one of the biggest prospects in Counter-Strike, instantly making a name for himself with his flashy AWP flicks, incredible speed and movement. However, he was still green and inexperienced back then. In 2024, m0NESY cements himself as one of the best AWPers in the scene, rivaling Zaiwu and can be considered the Nick Simple. On the T side, m0NESY moves with the pack as one of the last few players as a trade fragger, and covering the gaps that the team leaves when playing a default. With his incredible aim, m0NESY is also given a lot of space in the team to try and look for picks. While usually being the last player to enter the site, m0NESY tries to be in the action at all times, not being afraid to look for duels, and actively tries to put himself in a favourable position to close out a round. With the AWP, m0NESY doesn't become any less mobile, and in fact is enabled to be more aggressive as he tries to find openings and go for picks that could gain space for his team. On the CT side, m0NESY plays as a rotator. Obviously, as a rotator, m0NESY is just as mobile as the others, maybe even more so, being able to utilize his incredible movement to rotate on some maps faster. m0NESY, just like his T side, is constantly trying to put himself into the action, finding an opening then repositioning to keep his opponents guessing. m0NESY is also at times given the responsibility to anchor the side alone with the AWP, while the rest of his team tries to control a space somewhere else. Donk, the first player to ever make HLTV number 1 in his debut year of Tier 1 Counter-Strike, the new baby goat, who in his rookie year of Counter-Strike broke several incredible records in the scene. The first rifler to get HLTV number 1 since 2017, the youngest major MVP beating Gearby out in 2017, having the highest rating in a single ST event at IEM Katowice and the highest individual major rating of all time. All of this while being the entry fragger. Donk is a space taker. He plays with the pack as the first player in to get map control, actively looking to fight. In the early rounds, you can see him often trying to beat a smoke timing or molotov timing to try and get an opening for his team. He is not overly aggressive where oftentimes he'll get a kill and fall back unless his team is ready to push with him. While he is confident in his aim, he is also confident in his teammates' ability to trade for him. His biggest skill is actually his movement and positioning. He is seemingly always able to find extremely optimal 1v1s even in dire situations. The way he moves around the map is phenomenal, and in a way, he moves like m0NESY with the AWP, except that he's using a rifle, but is just as deadly, which makes him so much more versatile. As a rotator on the CT side, Donk is actually not as aggressive as you might think. While he still has his incredibly aggressive plays and insane aim to boot, Donk plays the game with very strong fundamentals. He is not afraid to take any duels coming his way, but he does not often make any aggressive plays alone. His aggression usually comes with a lot of support from his team, either through flashes or having multiple people with him. Like his T side, he moves like an AWPer, just with the rifle. He will look to hold long angles with the rifle in a safe position where he can retreat and immediately reposition himself to keep the opponents guessing, just for him to repick again. Thanks for watching this video. I understand that this video might be a little bit outdated now as Blast Bounty is already happening and we get to see that some of these players have already had some changes in their roles. But I still think it is rather interesting to see the changes in these players and how their playstyle might still be incorporated into their new roles. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to leave a like and comment. I'm always happy to discuss more upon the roles of these players and the opinions of you guys. Once again, thank you very much for watching this video and hopefully I'll make another one again soon.